Okay, good evening everyone. I declare the agenda briefing forum of the 17th of February 2026 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, Subiaco, open at 5:31 p.m. Welcome councillors, staff, media, members of the public. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar peoples, the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on this evening, and I recognise their ongoing connection to the land and waterways of Subiaco. I'll take attendances now, and we've got a single councillor away this evening. That would be Councillor Nicola Johnston on approved leave of absence, and I see the remaining councillors present in person and accounted for. So good evening to all of you, along with the CEO, ELT and various staff who are on hand as well. Okay, are there any disclosures of interest this evening, councillors? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have two. And I'll do both of them at the same time if I can, or one after the other. I, Rick Power, wish to declare an interest in agenda item C1 to be considered by the Council at its meeting on the 17th of February 26. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to clause 22.2 of the Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is I know the family of the applicant. And then I'd like to do a second one if I can, Mayor. I, Rick Powell, wish to declare an interest in agenda item C4 to be considered by Council at its meeting on the 17th of February 2026. The type of interest I wish to declare is proximity pursuant to section 560B of the Local Government Act of 1995. The nature of my interest is my home shares a common boundary with one of the homes on the Heritage Survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fife.
Thank you, Mayor. I, Danny Fife, wish to declare an interest in agenda item C1 to be considered by Council at its meeting on the 17th of February 2026. The type of interest I wish to declare is impartiality pursuant to clause 22.2 of the Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is long-term friendships and associations with applicants and objectors.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor McMullen, I also have an interest to declare. I, Penny O'Connor, wish to declare an interest in item C1, 129 Heytesbury Road, Subiaco, to be considered by Council at its meeting on 17th of February 2026. The nature of the interest is impartiality pursuant to clause 22.2 of the Code of Conduct for Council members, committee members and candidates. The nature of my interest is I'm friends of the owner of 123 Heytesbury Road and they've discussed the application with me. I know the father of the landowner socially and the landowner has also spoken to me about the application.
Thank you. Any other disclosures? Okay, thank you, councillors. We'll move on. I do live in the Shenton Park precinct as well, but I just wonder if we can get advice before we discuss this item on whether it's actually proximity interest or it's more correctly categorised as an impartiality interest. But we'll work through the agenda and maybe I'll just disclose it then, tonight I mean, but before we get to C4. Okay, there were no approved deputations. That brings us to announcements by the presiding member. And councillors, as you know, I don't tend to make announcements at ABFs, but I'll take the opportunity this evening because it's the first semi-formal gathering that we're having for the year. And I think that when there's important decision-making processes underway, it pays to keep people informed. So this evening I want to put on record a proposed course of action which the CEO emailed all councillors about last week. And for those members of the community who are following the Civic Precinct project and are wondering what happens at the close of consultation, this will hopefully provide some visibility and some clarity about the process over the next couple of months. So let's take this 1 month at a time. By next week at the February OCM, the consultation process or period will not yet have closed. So the proposed resolution for council to consider will therefore be as contained in the agenda that's in front of us at tonight's briefing, and assuming it's carried, council will resolve that the 3 motions from the annual electors meeting in December regarding the Civic Precinct project are to be included as part of a report to council at the conclusion of the consultation period to support council's decisions regarding any changes to the concept design. That resolution's been carefully drafted as a deliberate signal of intent that council will make meaningful use of what came out of the electors meeting. And that will bring us to March, by which time the consultation process will have concluded. And whilst the agenda is not set until the CEO finalises it, the proposal at the moment is for a resolution that would ask the CEO to do a number of things. First, the CEO would prepare a detailed response to the community feedback. Secondly, Lions would be instructed to prepare different building options regarding responding to the community feedback. Third, the CEO would prepare an updated project timeline with milestones to be included with each report to council. And fourth, the independent cost estimations would be sourced along with independent financial and economic appraisal, and these would then be kept up to date throughout the project timeline. This is all about alignment of expectations and clarity of process, and it's about transparency and about council giving clear direction about what comes next. The February and March OCMs are by no means the end of council's decision making on this project, but my hope is that council will demonstrate a sensible, orderly, incremental way forward, informed by all of the community feedback that the city has actively sought over the past 3 months since November. So, like I said, the agenda's never finalised until the CEO finalises it, but we thought it useful at this point to give an indication of what the agenda item in the March OCM may look like in relation to the Civic Precinct. Thank you. Okay, councillors, now we will move through the agenda for the February OCM, beginning with C1, 129 Hastbury Road, Subiaco, additions and alterations, including an undercroft level to the existing single house. Any questions on C1? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. My question relates to how competing interests are weighed in terms of deliberations. We have public interest. The report talks about public amenity and certain aspects of the design, activating the street. We've got the interests of neighbours on either side and at the rear, and obviously the interests of the applicants themselves and the owners themselves. So I wonder if you can shed any light on how we, or you, I suppose, since you've provided the recommendation, how you have weighed up those competing interests, which are in some respects in conflict.
Director of Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So the planning legislation provides a framework on the matters that need to be considered. It all starts with our local planning scheme and the planning codes, the residential design codes, and also the LPS regulations, which are read into our scheme. So there's a process on that. Essentially what happened in the first instance was the applicants would have been made aware of the heritage designation of the area, and they would have too long. There you go. The Heritage Advisory Service, and that all feeds into the application that they would have submitted. That application would have both been assessed by our planning staff, but also through internal referrals through parks, through heritage services, through engineering services, and the like. And they form one component of the assessment. The application is also put out new speakers which keep cutting me off, which is going to be interesting. So the application with all the materials put out for public consultation, and then we receive feedback. So in this instance, we received comments both supporting and objecting to the application, and the actual issues that are teased out in those comments are then provided back to the applicant to be addressed. Now, in considering those issues, there are a few different pathways. So the R codes provides you with the pathway that's either deemed to comply or design principle assessment. In this instance, there's only 4 areas that need a design principle assessment, and because they don't meet the deemed to comply criteria, that pathway has chosen. So we considered what the design approach was for that in accordance with what the submissions may have said and the technical advice. And then we made a judgment based on the planning recommendations from the team and what was actually put on the plans. So all of that has formed a recommendation to council. There are other elements that also may not be considered as well, such as there's a swimming pool, but under our policy, the swimming pool is actually exempt from the need for approval. That's under council's policy. So there's a raft of considerations that go in there. And on the basis of it, this proposal was considered to be appropriate in its context. We considered the submissions, both supporting and objecting. I think there was a difference of 3. And the design responses are recommended for approval to council. So that doesn't really answer your question. But given that there's a raft of different opinions, it's hard to go through every one and suggest as to why it was considered one way or the other. The schedule of submissions that's included as an attachment would say what the design response is to that issue raised, and considered what is an acceptable outcome.
Thank you. Councillor Pine.
Thank you, Alex. I've got another question on a similar topic. Given that the proposal is being assessed against the design principles for essentially the boundary walls, the building height, etc., are there any set criteria to be met to satisfy that amenities have no adverse impact on neighbours? So that's the first question. And the follow-up question, if there are no set criteria, is it fair to conclude that satisfying the amenities is a subjective matter?
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So there's no, if it was to be a deemed to comply approach, then there are certain criteria that you can meet. But there's no one thing saying a deemed to comply correct or a design principle is correct. It's whatever the pathway the applicant chooses. So when you have a design principle approach, there is a set of criteria that we've listed in the attachment as well, which says any adverse impacts need to consider these factors, and is the design response for that particular design principle. So for lot boundary setback, for building height, they're all going to be different design principles. So in the assessment that we prepared and we've put into the attachment, for each of those design principles, we've put a response and we've said why we think the proposal does achieve that design principle. Because there's various ones for different elements, so lot boundary setback or building height. I can't explain them all to you now, but they are in that. it is both, an assessment can be both qualitative and quantitative in nature, noting that you might have some deemed to comply criteria which you can use as a basis, but that's not always to be considered in a design principle assessment. So it really is a mix of art versus science, and in considering that, everyone's got a different point of view as well. So what some people might find absolutely acceptable, it's different to other people. Subiaco is unique, given that it has small lot sizes and it has a lovely heritage and character flavour to it. So nearly every house in Subiaco that I've seen, actually I would say I've not seen one that's got a completely deemed to comply approach. So it's all design principle assessment.
So just a follow-up question. So essentially it's a subjective assessment against a set of criteria.
Yes, that's correct, but it is guided by explanatory guidelines and a set of planning controls.
Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. I guess just a follow-up question thematically on what I asked before. In considering development in a heritage area, which is what this development is, there's our policies, our local planning policy 3.4 talks about development being in harmony with heritage fabric and maintaining integrity and things, but it also talks about the need for new development not to mimic or imitate or be faux. How are those two things weighted? Or are we talking about yet another subjective perspective, as Councillor Pine mentioned, basically?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. We did receive your email earlier about the heritage impact statement, so we will update the report to include that. We always get a lot of technical information, so it's always a balance on how much information we put in there, so we don't overburden elected members. But we will include it, and that would actually provide some more guidance on how the heritage has been constructed in the planning assessment. Again, a little bit of art versus science. So what you don't want to do in faux heritage is try to create tuck-pointed new red brick when you have existing tuck-pointed red brick there. You also don't want to have a material that's absolutely different and that is not in harmony with what's there. So you might, every, I guess, design proposal is going to be different. So it's really hard for me to give you a concrete example. But if there are natural materials used, you want to use, similar natural materials that may not necessarily have to be in the same colour, but they should distinguish where the new development is different or the new extension is different from the existing heritage fabric. So sorry to not give you any concrete example on what element there is, but however, this proposal did go through the city's Heritage Advisory Service and was considered by the Coordinator of Heritage. And I think with the Heritage Impact Statement, once we upload that and provide that to you, it will show you how we got to those points.
Thank you. Any other questions on the agenda item? Councillor Burns.
Thank you. How do we justify or balance the applicant who's dealing under our current codes, guidelines, and everything else against the neighbours in this particular case to the east that built under a previous ill-conceived town planning concept that were ours, not the state's, of the middle third policy. Okay, and so they were subjected to and I'm not nobody here, but arguably except for myself. So you look at what they've ended up with because they were made to. Okay, now that is not affecting, to my mind, the rights of the people next door, but you've got old policies and new policies sitting next to each other, okay? And to me, they beg a moral question. I'd also probably ask that you did some explanation to perhaps councillors, the newer councillors or other councillors that don't even understand the concept of the middle third policy. And I will acknowledge that the director didn't think much of the middle third policy anyway, and it wasn't his. So I take that as given.
Thanks, Councillor. Mr. Petrosky.
Look, thanks, Councillor Burns. You're absolutely correct. Planning controls change and local planning policies changed. And then there is a tension between people who had to develop in accordance with what the old rules were and people who are now exercising their applications with what the new controls are. That's an ongoing tension. The way that the planning framework deals with that is to make sure, is to consider controls around amenity, overlooking, overshadowing, and all those sorts of things. So that it's really considering amenity in proposals rather than the chosen built form that the council had at the time. You can't actually, you can consider a development how it's constructed and what it feels on the ground and how you might respond to that. To make sure there's obviously no overlooking and all that sort of stuff, overshadowing, which this development is compliant with. What you can't consider is the fact that someone built with you can't essentially consider the moral judgment because someone built with an old policy and someone is building with the new policy. It's what the development footprint is on the ground at that time. So I know it's a very difficult decision for elected members to make, because it's based on the facts of what's actually on the ground and what the planning framework says at that day and time when an application is put forward.
Okay, I see what you're driving at, and expected as much. No, I don't say that cheekily, just because I know we're like-minded on the subject. But just to help out, could you just explain what exactly we're talking about? You said the other thing you said they built at the time under this policy. Well, I'd say the way I'd say it is they were made to build at the time by us under a council policy. So you don't need to go back over that because I think you'd accept it, unless you don't accept it. It's moreover just for everybody's enlightenment or reminding the people that do know, what was the middle third policy and what it did to people. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I think there's some assumed knowledge in these types of discussions, but talk it through at a level that perhaps the newest councillors wouldn't be aware of necessarily.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. And before I get too decorative, it essentially led to a wedding cake design for houses, where you would have a single-story base of the house, and if the house was going to go to a second story, that second story had to be in the middle block of that lot. So you kind of had a tiered effect. And there was a thinking of that time that was the type of development they wanted to achieve. So many houses built like that. And that was because of the council's policy of the time, and it was before the regulation changes as well. So essentially people were forced to build in that way. The policies have now changed where second story developments are now considered behind the line of the site. So it presents as a single story to where there's a predominantly single story street area frontage. To maintain the character of that. That allows for a more flexible design in considering how you might put a second story on some of our lots. So the difference is some people were forced to have a middle third, where this application has a different set of policy provisions where they consider a second story in other areas of the lot. Obviously, it can't be at the front given the heritage considerations and the single story frontage of that street.
Councillor Pine.
I'd like to go back to the amenity issues. I know there's a wall trellis being proposed as a mitigation to the reduced setback along the eastern boundary wall. That wall is at least in excess of 6 metres. What would be the expected timeframe for any mitigation to be effective according to the regulation? Because I do realise, you know, it takes time for plants to grow. So how many years are the occupants going to have to face essentially a brick wall?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The landscaping by itself doesn't lend support for that design principle variation. So it's one factor to it, and there's articulation to the wall and the treatment to the wall. There's many factors to it. So set back about 1.64 metres, right? Now the existing neighbour set back just over 1 metre. So they've got a smaller setback as well. The argument essentially goes both ways. Now this lot has to endure that wall as well. So the landscaping is a really good addition, and we commend the applicant on that. It will take some time for these species to grow. It has been confirmed that it is a viable product by our Parks and Environment team, and essentially, as I understand it, the landscaping was a response to some of the public consultation feedback that they received. So look, it could grow relatively quickly. It could be, look, I'm not the best gardener out there. It could be a year or two. But the presence of a wall, it is a well-articulated wall. It is about 1.5 metres lower than what it could be under Category B of the Residential Design Code. So it's not in excess of what you would normally consider in a 2-storey wall. The landscaping just responds to some of the feedback received in consultation. And if it works, that'd be really good. It could be a year or two. But eventually, if it doesn't, or if it changes, it doesn't negate the support for that wall through the design principle assessment.
Councillor Jones. Thank you. Another amenity question, I guess, because I think that's what this is coming down to. We have to balance, I guess, the amenity of the for the proponent having a new dwelling against the amenity loss that the neighbours perceive they're going to have, and the assessed amenity that you're putting in. There's those. What sort of weight do we need to give to those? If in the worst case this did come to SAT, how would they assess the amenity and make these deliberations? Can we get some guidance on how we balance the different perceptions of the change of amenity?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. If you went to a tribunal hearing, obviously there's a mediation, and council will have another view or another opportunity to reconsider if it is refused or not acted upon. The issues will be broken down, and they would be subject to a civic, which is a document, and then witness statements and professionals who would argue the merits of the amenity one way or the other. Those merits would then be teased out. They'd go before a panel member, and the panel would decide. Our recommendation to council is that they are acceptable in this instance. So obviously the city officers couldn't be witnesses in that case. However, for every planner that you have that would probably support something, there'd probably be another planner who would argue the other way. And it is really up to council to make that call. Now, we've considered everything. We've considered the design principles, the guidance, the definition of the terms in there, and with our experience and what other planning proposals have used, we find that this is acceptable.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And through you, probably a little bit different to the other ones. There seem to be quite a lot of conditions attached to this approval, if there is to be one. And look, I'm interested in condition 10, that a tree marked in red on the approval plans shall be retained in perpetuity to the satisfaction of the City of Subiaco. How common is that sort of condition? I haven't seen one before, so how common is that sort of condition, and how is it actually? How can they actually guarantee a tree in perpetuity?
Understand that's a question for the Manager of Planning Services, Anthony Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So, yeah, condition 10 relates to Council's sustainable development policy, which affords a higher rating where tree retention of a mature tree is proposed. So we don't get these requests too often, but we do jump at the chance if someone is proposing to retain a mature tree, because with our declining tree canopy, it is an issue, particularly on private property. So the applicant is proposing to do this as their sole, way of achieving the local planning policy 1.3 to achieve 75 credits, which is the highest or second highest element to get the policy over the line.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, look, I do have a follow-up, but how can they, in perpetuity? I mean, trees do not live forever, and we do have diseases. I mean, how is this actually able? They can use their best endeavours, but how can it actually be enforced if it's a condition which is compulsory?
Question for the Director.
In perpetuity is a planning term that we love to use. Essentially what it means is that for the life of the development, there's a mature tree there. Now, we all know that trees will die. And if that tree was to ever be removed or it's dead, we're not going to go in there and start compliancing or finding people, but we'd expect that there'd be another mature tree or something, or another tree planted in that respect. We'd consider the circumstances as to why it declined. Was poor health? We can get an arborist report and all that sort of stuff. So what we're expecting is that there's going to be a tree there. We totally understand that that specific tree that's there at the moment might not be there, and there might be a good reason for it not to be there, but then that will be replaced with another tree. So it's a net benefit of maintaining a tree to add to our canopy, which is good. It runs with the life of the development. So, for however long that development's there, there needs to be a tree there. And if that needs to be changed, then that can come to council for another decision, or to the city for another decision.
Thank you. Look, and on to another matter, which is in the advice notes, which I think are not enforceable or not compulsory. It says that the engineering technical details submitted with the building permit application must include the methodologies which demonstrate that the proposed building work is carried out without causing adverse effects on the stability, structural stability of the surrounding buildings and property, or reduce the bearing capacity of neighbouring land. Now, that is an advice note, as I say, not enforceable. So why are we terming it that they must include those methodologies?
Mr. Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So you're right, Councillor Power, advice notes are not enforceable. What we try and do with all approvals is try to capture as much information from our internal departments to provide the best guidance to applicants if they are to act on their approval, what the next steps are. So they would require, this is proposing a basement, one of the conditions is we're seeking the imposition of a dilapidation report for a number of properties. And as a consequence of that, the nature of the building permit, they would need certain engineering standards to be met and considered. And what the advice note is seeking to do is saying that must be provided at the building permit stage. Whilst it can't be enforced through the planning approval, it would be required at the building permit stage.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there seems a lot of fill across the site. Is that correct? and obviously I'm aware that there's an easement, Water Corp easement, and there's a fall of about 2 metres, I think, across the site. The report talks at various points about responding to those challenges and the slope in particular. Obviously, one response is to fill, another response would be to do something different. Is it unusual to have this much fill on a development site in Subiaco where you've got similar kinds of conditions? I mean, it's something that has been raised by some of the other comments from the public, you know, that all of these blocks have 2 metre fall, but not everyone has gone down this path. So I'm just wondering, yeah, how common this sort of approach is, if you know.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Or it's definitely not uncommon. So the R codes require fill excavation within 0.5 or half a metre, essentially. And I think this site has a 2 metre slope from front to back. So essentially, this would level it out and allow for the site to be developed in accordance with the plans. We were just required to assess that in the R codes assessment. And as I said before, given that the development that's proposed there is considered appropriate within the planning context, essentially the fill and excavation needs to achieve that, and it would be considered appropriate in the context and not dissimilar to how we might deal with many applications that have such a significant slope across the site.
Any other questions? Councillor Pine.
Still on amenity, but maybe on looking at the southern edge of the development, there are some overshadowing onto the properties at 122 Hansman Road. I note in the report that there is a window that will have some overshadowing in the winter on the Wilter Celsius. So my question is really, can you clarify how much proportion of the window do you need to lose lighting before you don't actually meet the criteria, which is design principle for that on the overshadowing?
Manager Planning Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So there's no magic number, but within each design principle, as Director Petrosky's pointed out earlier, there are defined terms which guide us. So in this case, in the design principles, one of the criteria is access to daylight or to sunlight. Sunlight is a direct beam of light. Basically, that's how it's defined. So if that particular window was the only source of sunlight, direct sunlight for that particular room at any given time in the year, if this development was to obscure that or block that, it's unlikely it would meet the design principle. In Figure 3 in the attachment, that is showing, in the officer's report, that is showing the shadow line intersecting with the window, which clearly shows that it's it still provides a direct beam of sun into that room. So if it was the case that it didn't provide for that direct beam of sun, then the design principle assessment would be different. But because it does allow for that direct beam of sun, it is supportable.
Councillors, any other questions? Okay, I think that brings us to the end of C1. We'll move on to C2. The draft amended Local Planning Policy 7.1 Design Review Panel Terms of Reference. Any questions on, sorry, that's C3. C2 is the Development WA referral for Lot 201 Hayes Street, Subiaco, the 6-storey multiple dwelling development. Any questions on C2? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. With regards to the shortfall of bicycles, or the bicycle parking that's put there, I don't see any reference to electric charging. There's alternative means of transport would include scooters, electric things like that. Is there any reference to people being able to charge their electric mobility equipment?
Mr. Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So in one of the attachments relating to the 4-star Green Star rating, I think it was pointed out by one of the elected members this afternoon via email, there is discussion about electric charging for bicycles. I think there was some confusion that it might be provided for cars, but that was not the case. It's actually for bicycles. So the number's undefined, but we have requested additional bicycle parking be provided for in the proposal.
No follow-ups. Any other questions? Councillor Pine.
Thank you. I see this proposal has essentially no site parking for residents and only 4 visitors car parking bay. So clearly an issue if you're going to have potentially 100 people living in those apartments. Can you share a little bit why there isn't any sort of parking? What are the showstoppers for having some parking provisions at this site?
One for the director.
Yeah, thank you. Look, this isn't a proposal that we've prepared. It's a proposal that's been prepared by Development WA. I would suggest that it's all driven by the marketability and the commercial realisation of being able to develop that land. When you put in parking, and if you include a lot of parking bays, what happens is it takes away from the land area that you can develop. There's turning circles and all that sort of stuff. And I would suggest that given the access there with Hay Street being a blue road under or another regional road under the framework, there's limited access from Hay Street, and it'd be extremely difficult and cost prohibitive to be able to put in a basement given the dimensions of the site. So I would say that it's likely been designed in this way, given it wouldn't be feasible to be able to create a development that would have sufficient parking as you would in any other development. Most developments that we see provide parking to increase the saleability of them. So, people might want 1 or 2 or even more parking bays. There's been a concerted push across inner city Perth and Subi itself to reduce the amount of parking in proposals. Because we are moving away from a car-dominated society. So what we do see is the market coming back and saying, actually, we do want to sell it with this because we think we can market it with additional car parking bays. So, the short answer is it's market-driven, given the cost of creating parking and the limited size of the site.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that often pops up around Subi Centro when we're talking to residents there is the lack of suitable stopping places for delivery vehicles, removals vans and the like. They take up a lot of space, and often they're just parking on the footpaths because there's nowhere suitable. I don't recall if there's anything in their plan. Is there somewhere suitable that removals vans would be able to park so that people can actually get their gear in and out of the buildings?
Major Planning Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So there is delivery, space to do deliveries on site. It is probably quite tight. We understand that it is, an issue when there is higher density areas, and people often rely on, on-street parking. I think they might need to obtain an obstruction permit to do that. So there are ways to actually use those bays, but it's difficult for this individual development. If you ask them to provide for a dedicated space for a truck of a certain size to the relevant Australian standards, you'd find that half the site is wiped out and undevelopable, as kind of Director Petrosky was referring to, just with car parking in general. So it is a challenge, but they can obtain obstruction permits from the city to do that.
Okay, councillors, any other questions? Doesn't look like it. We'll move on to C3. Draft amended local planning policy 7.1, design review panel terms of reference. Any questions on C3, councillors? Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. Look, I noticed that there's a suggestion or a plan for the DRP to meet once a month, but they only met 5 times last year, so why would we be looking at the meeting every month if they met less than half that last year?
Director of Development Services.
Thank you. It provides some guidance so that potential applicants know that there's going to be a meeting at a certain time of the month. If there are no items, as what happened last year, the meeting is just cancelled in good time. So the people don't rock up, and the architects or the DRP doesn't get paid. So essentially, people know block out their calendars on Wednesday in the afternoon. It's when the DRP meets. And then it also provides a cadence. So when proposals come through, we can have a timeline for their submission, their consideration, all that sort of stuff. But if there's no meeting required because there's no proposals, as what happened last year, meetings will be cancelled. Some years may be busier than others.
Follow up.
Okay, all right, thank you. And look, it's also said that there's also in the plan to create more diversity amongst the DRP representatives. How is that going to be, and more local input? How is that going to be achieved?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. This was a suggestion from elected members and council from the previous time when we appointed a panel. What we'll do is we'll make sure that we advertise this EOI, this opportunity, in a range of different places, making sure that it's available for many people to put their hats in the ring. We will we can target some advertisements to assist with that. What we will consider is the panel members or potential panel members' response and their suitability for any role that's advertised. It's not essentially saying that there will be a quota or anything along those lines. There would still need to be an assessment on a person's skill, availability, attributes, and experience. But it's just putting it out there for a range of people to be able to apply and making sure that it has been well known. In the end, it's up to council to appoint based on the recommendations or otherwise that we provide.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors, on C3? All right, I think we can move on to C4, the Shenton Park Precinct Local Heritage Survey consultation. Yeah, Councillor Powell, you did declare a proximity interest, but it creates a curious situation because I'm going to declare an interest as well for this item. But mine's well, not for that reason, but because of the nature of what I'm declaring, mine's an impartiality. I would think because I live within the boundaries of the Shenton Park precinct, so that's an impartiality interest pursuant to clause 22.2 of the Code of Conduct. So on that basis, I believe I can stay in the seat. We will call you back after C4. Okay, councillors, any questions on C4? Councillor Pine.
Thank you. Would you be able to explain how public consultation will inform the final proposal going to council? What could we expect in that area?
Mr. Denham?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So this proposal, just as some background, has gone through extensive community engagement to this point. If council resolves to advertise the draft local heritage survey in its current form, it can potentially be modified to include additional places that we may have missed, remove other ones that have been included if we have received more information that we haven't had access to date. So that's basically what can happen as a result of the community feedback, and that has happened in the past, and we've done other reviews.
Follow up, Councillor Powell.
Just for clarification, if somebody doesn't want their house to be included in the area, can they actually object, and will that result in basically that house being removed from the area?
Mr. Petrovsky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. We've got an obligation to consider local heritage surveys. So if there is an objection, we'll consider the merits of the objection and we'll provide our recommendation to council. Ultimately, it'll be council's decision on whether they're included or otherwise.
Councillor Fife.
Thank you. And my question has been sent through from Councillor Councillor Johnston, and it's basically, why is the ficus tree in 3 Cullen Street been included? I mean, given that we've got shot hole borer and issues with what are we calling it? The in perpetuity type of concerns. Why would a tree qualify, and why is it included?
Mr. Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. Might have to take that one on notice because there's quite a few properties and that make up the listing. But generally speaking, trees can be included on heritage lists. This isn't a heritage list per se. This is a local heritage survey, so it has no planning control or ability to influence what happens with that. It's an information resource only. It may inform or guide future decisions regarding heritage, but I'd have to look into the specifics of it. It would be in the attachment as to why it's of heritage significance, but it wouldn't be in there if it didn't have any.
Mr. Petrovsky.
Yes, and thank you, through you, Mayor. So while Mr. Denham was talking, I was able to find it. So it's it has cultural significance for its aesthetic contribution to the streetscape through its scale, grandeur, and shade. It's got a good condition with high integrity and authenticity. It also has a historical association with early 20th century civic planting schemes in Subiaco.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, looks like we can move on from C4. We'll invite Councillor Powell back in, and we'll move on to C5, another Shenton Park related matter. Okay, we'll press on. C5, the Evans Street to Keatley Road Safe Active Street Project traffic monitoring results. Any questions, councillors, on C5? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. It was funded by the WA Bike Network. Have we received any feedback from them? Presumably they'd have an interest in this.
Okay, Major Engineering Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, look, the Department of Transport have been involved all along through the development of the project. They were part of the public opening that we had late last year as well. Feedback has been anecdotal so far, really supportive, and they are very eagerly awaiting the results of our surveys as planned later in the year as well. In March, we've got some bike surveys that we are taking along the street as well. And it's part of the wider project that the DOT have to promote cycling and walking across the city. There've been a few projects that they've rolled out across the city. Subiaco is obviously the first for ours, but really positive feedback and hugely supportive of what we're doing.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. Were the traffic studies carried out at the same time as they were the year before, so that they are batching studies?
Major Engineering Services.
Thank you, and through you again, Mayor. No, they weren't, but they don't need to be, Councillor. What these surveys do is they pick a representative sample for any given day. The surveys are normally run over a 7-day period. The periods we've chose are pretty typical periods for counting traffic, so they are comparable. It's pretty normal to do it that way. And things we avoid are public holidays and school holidays, which tend to affect or impact the results.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor. But if the studies are being done at different times, isn't that going to change the way, the interpretation of the results?
Major Engineering Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. It doesn't, because the 7-day count that we get is actually called your annual average daily traffic, and that's effectively a representation of what you'd expect across a road on a day across the entire year. So that's used in all traffic studies as a representative count throughout the year. So it's known to not affect the actual results of traffic using a road either before and after.
Thank you. I'll ask the Director of Technical Services to comment as well.
Thank you. Just to add to what the Manager of Engineering said, obviously we've been doing these kind of traffic surveys across the city for almost 2 decades. So we've got a very good base as far as what the traffic profiles look like through the year. And like Randir has mentioned, that you won't get much variability during those standard periods that we do monitor, i.e. outside of public holidays and school holidays. It's pretty negligible statistically wise as far as the variance. So the time it's given, if you were to do that in July, as the pre-survey is done, you'll get almost the exact same results. And that's what we've seen for the last 2 decades of traffic counting when we've picked different times of year.
Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you. Look, are there any results then about whether the Safe Active Street has been successful in getting more bikes and e-riders using the road? You know, do we know whether it's actually a success in that form?
Director of Technical Services.
Thank you. So the hard numbers we'll have after March, and that survey that Randir mentioned earlier. We have received some anecdotal feedback, and obviously I've personally witnessed it when I've been at Lake Julbup in the surrounding area. I've seen quite a number of e-rideable users and also just cyclists and pedestrians. So we've had a smattering of anecdotal feedback, but we'll have the hard numbers after March. I don't know if the Manager of Engineering wanted to say anything else.
Thank you. Councillor Fife.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The concern that I have is that an almost 10%, I know it's less than 10%, I don't think that's negligible. There's anecdotal stories from the people in Shenton Park, Wayland Street, Morgan Street, Evans Street of rat runners using those side streets as a way of short-circuiting the major distribution roads. And with that concern and perception in the community, I'm just wondering whether or not recommending that, you know, no routine plan counts be abandoned for that, and maybe we should sort of monitor particularly those sites that seem to be having a 10% increase within a year on an ongoing basis for a couple of years at least.
Manager Engineering Services, if you'd like to comment.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. I wonder if it might be helpful, Councillor, just to clarify the figure that we have in the report. That 10% does not relate to the increase that we've seen. It's actually indicating the total percentage of traffic that's actually using the road compared to what it can actually carry. So in other words, these local roads, the general standards and the way they're designed, you can actually have up to 3,000 vehicles per day. And these are carrying under 10% of that, so around about 300. The actual increases in numbers that we're seeing is around about 1 or less than 1%. So it's quite negligible. And I think the other point is, if you look at the capacity or the carrying capacity of these roads, there's a lot more headroom in terms of additional traffic that they can carry, if that makes sense.
Sorry, and I might just add a little bit to that. So obviously, these kind of concerns are not unusual amongst the community, and that's why we do have a routine traffic monitoring program in place. And there's actually a subheading in just the comments where we talk about the further monitoring, saying that the city has committed and will be doing some more in the following year, so we can keep an eye on those locations where we know, I guess, there's those concerns. So that 10%, which is only about less than a vehicle an hour, could be just a bit of an outlier, but we'll have a better idea, and we'll monitor that. And if it's part of a trend or is a greater variance, then that's something that we could look at, potentially act on. But the monitoring is committed to, so that's something we pick up as part of that.
Councillor Powell.
Yeah, something of an ambit question. You've mentioned the road traffic studies. Are they available to the public, or because I've seen that there are traffic monitors being put throughout extensive areas. Are those the results of those traffic studies? Are they available to the general public at all?
I'll ask the director to comment on that.
Yes, so as you can appreciate, it's not uncommon to have concerns raised with us, and often we have a standard internal processes for assessing, and that assesses a lot of criteria, not just volumes and speeds, but there's a lot of other criteria that goes into it that helps us determine whether it's worth intervening in some form. Typically, when we run these reports, we provide that to typically a resident, and that has all of this information is contained in the report as far as volumes and speeds, but also other criteria that we assess. So it's stuff that we do provide to the public. So if there are those members in the community who are particularly interested in this, that I guess encourage them to reach out to the city, and we can, I guess, provide whatever information we've got available.
Councillor Fife.
Yeah, just a further question on that, because I think whilst you're right in that it's 1% of total capacity, it's actual on the previous year, 264 over 240, 220 to increase, 364 and 334. It is almost a 10% increase, and if those things are occurring at peak hour when people are taking their kids to school, there is a sense of, like, if you've got an extra 30 cars in an hour along a stretch of road that's your suburban street, I think there's potential legitimate concern, and it'd be interesting to have a look at the distribution of those at times relative to what they were before. But, just encouraging you and agreeing that further monitoring down the track and that allaying the anxieties of people in those areas that have expressed concern.
Actually, could I just speak to that, Matt?
Yeah,
Just very briefly.
I think you spoke to it last time, but if you wanted to follow that up, what you didn't say when the microphone was on was that it would be the further monitoring would happen in future years, so it will happen. Yep. Councillors, any other questions? Okay, I think we can move on to C6, the 2025 annual electors meeting. Any questions on C6, councillors? Councillor Fife.
I think I'm on the motion with respect to the request for rangers to be full time. That aspect of it. One of the things is that there's a in the notes it says that the crime in Subiaco is going down. It's gone down on previous years, and there's been a 20% decrease in crime. One of the things is that I'd like to have some clarity about is how is that crime measured? One of the things, I'll give you an example. I've had a property in Park Street for a long time, or the last few years, been drug dealers there, been numerous complaints by myself and other people about that antisocial behaviour going on from people, and the police attended once with respect to that particular issue. Does that count as crime? Does it? What you know? How do you assess crime, and what are we talking about? Because there's perception and then there's statistics, and I'm not sure whether or not is it the number of people that are arrested? Is it the number of people that where they say an actual crime's been committed? If the police don't come, no crime.
I suspect they're not going to be our statistics, but Director Development Services, you or your team have had a close working relationship with local police. Are you able to provide some clarity on how what the statistics mean?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So we do use the publicly available WA Police Force Crime Statistics Report. So that is crimes and stats that are collated by WA Police. And in terms of our discussions with police representatives over the past year, acknowledging that you probably weren't, or you weren't an elected member then, they have been, there were discussions with both members of the police force and the Crime Stoppers organisation as well. And that did show a trend of actual crime going down. The perception of crime or the perception of antisocial behaviour has perhaps changed. However, that hasn't actually translated into actual crime figures that are being reported by the police. So it is the actual crime stats from the police that we are using. They're all publicly available as well.
Councillor Pine.
Sorry, on a similar vein, with respect to the crime statistics and also the incidents, do we have an analysis of the patterns of these crime statistics in terms are they occurring during the day, during night, weekends or not? Because clearly there are some grievances within the community regarding this. So have we really explored the grievances and then really looking at the data in different ways? Because maybe 24 hours ranger service is not the appropriate solution, but there may be some other solution that we can actually improve security around Subiaco.
Well, look, whoever answers it, I hope you can cover the significant amounts of work that went into the community safety framework that Council endorsed last year, and the types of analysis into crime statistics which inform that. CEO, you're pretty actively involved in that exercise, so perhaps you can answer the question.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. As the Mayor pointed out, we did go through a lot. We involved information from the police. We worked with them, had a series of workshops with the elected members, and that went into the report that went to Council, which Council endorsed in August. There are, exactly as you say, a range of mechanisms by which reduce crime, whether it be a statistic or a non-statistic, and much of that conversation related to the increase of passive surveillance through like your night markets on a Saturday night and those types of things. So all of that was considered. I think where most of the frustration of the community tend to come through generally relates to the gap, which I think Councillor Fyfe's referring to in terms of will the police come and arrest versus is it a nuisance or is it an offence? And they rightly put their energy into serious crime. Okay, so although there may be an offence occurring and the right place to call is the police, they may not attend. And that's generally where the greatest concern is. So we've worked with the police on a protocol to deal with that particular gap that is there, and we do have a novel approach. We haven't used that yet, but we do have that in our toolkit. In addition to that, we've used a bunch of other elements in terms of CCTV and those types of things to introduce elements of opportunity to provide evidence that we could assist the police with, so that the police would be incentivised to come and make those charges. So we can brief the elected members on that again, particularly yourselves as being new. I think that would be a really good, but I suppose what we're saying in relation to this, the evidence in terms of 24/7 security patrols, it's not something we consider is an appropriate tool, not only given the costs, but given the limited powers. They have the same powers as you and I do, but we do have a bit of a season where there are elements of more antisocial behaviour, and we do have some tools in place that we can use to deal with that those particular issues, particularly in that nuisance and also antisocial that ordinarily the police wouldn't come and arrest, but we've got the tools in place to be able to deal with that, and the police have given a commitment, assuming they're not dealing with a very serious crime, that they will come and affect that in terms of our working with us. So I suppose what this recommendation is to say, we acknowledge it, we'll keep monitoring it, we'll look at the stats, and what we'll do is we'll give that opportunity for that framework and those things that we put in place to respond when when any sort of antisocial issues type occur within the public realm. And like I said, it is sort of matters that are either nuisance or escalating above that, but perhaps not quite in that serious territory where the police are likely to come and arrest someone.
Thank you. I might ask some questions in relation to that particular motion, just in case other people want to get on to some of the other ones arising out of the electors meeting. Just a clarification on terminology firstly. I've heard a couple of councillors talk about ranges, but looking back at the motion which was carried at the electors meeting, it talks about a security patrol service like the one currently operating in the City of Stirling. Can someone advise me as to whether they're using rangers or a security firm in Stirling? Director, Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Like many councils, local governments may look to contract out a service, or they might look to use internal staff. So from what I understand, the City of Stirling would use a combination of a contractor, such as Wilson, who may be available for that, or repurposing internal staff and FTEs, such as rangers, to do the same service. That does mean changing internal things like position descriptions and those sorts of things. So what there's a mixture of ways that one could do it, but in the crux of it, some of the issues that are occurring won't actually be solved by this, because the community feedback.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Director. I think we've covered that, but just to clarify, what is the City of Stirling doing? Are they using private security firms, or are they using their rangers, or a combination of both? A combination? Director of Technical Services, you've got some insight?
Yes, so obviously in preparing this report, our manager for Cultural Services did contact Stirling about their arrangement, and from what I understand, it's primarily contracted out to Wilson Security, that service.
Just if I could, the important aspect of this was couched in the terms of security. So rangers can, or in some local governments may, perform elements of that sort of eyes on the street approach, but rangers have much broader role in relation to animals and parking and other matters, whereas the actual reason for this motion at the annual electors meeting focus was on the patrol of security type focus, which is generally most of governments, Bayswater, Stirling, and I think Swan have out up in Ellenbrook, and that is Canning have a couple as well. Some have predominantly just in industrial areas. There's different approaches, but generally there's a charge of each ratepayer, and it's a service charge relating, and they generally outsource it to a firm that has their own, but some insource it as well. But the focus is community safety or security, as opposed to the other elements that rangers deal with.
Thanks. I've just got a further question that I think follows on from the previous one. Sterling apparently is paying $6 million per annum on this security service. Where did that figure come from? Is that something that officers at Sterling advised in the last month or so? And is it comprised of a combination of Wilson's fees and internal staffing costs to the extent they're using rangers? Mr. Petrosky.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I'm getting it up now, but I believe it was based on their publicly available documents, whether that was in their budget and or their financial report. So it was publicly available.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions, any other questions on C6? Okay. I think we can move on to C7 then. Proposed terms of reference update for the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. Councillors. We'll take that as a no, which is fine. No questions on C7. C8, a leasing matter in relation to 23 Bishop Street, Jolimont. Okay, doesn't look like it. C9, financial statements and reports for the month ending 31st of December 2025. Okay, final agenda item then, C10, financial statements and reports for the month ending 31st of January 2026. C10, sorry. Any questions on C10? Okay, councillors, that is the end of the agenda briefing for this evening. I'll declare the briefing closed at 6:48 p.m. Thank you, councillors, for your attendance and questions, and thank you, staff, for all your advice.